I just want to ask real quick, are you recording this?
Yes, is that okay?
No, it's fantastic.
Okay. Yeah, I
Um,
just started recording, so.
Terrific. Hi, my name is Brad Rushing. I'm a director of photography. Uh, I have been in the business now for 33 years. I'm a native Houstonian. I was born and raised in Houston and spent the first 25 years of my life there, which means that's where I went to school. That's where I got my start in the business. I was a fine art major at the high school for performing and visual arts. Then I went to University of Houston, and I also took some classes at HCC. You know, when my first job out of school was working as a camera operator for a home shopping network, a long defunct home shopping network, which was based over off of 59 Freeway. But I actually got hired out of college. I didn't graduate. Somebody told me about the job, and I said, "Oh my gosh, you know, an opportunity to make some money." And the funny thing too was I had done some film classes in school in U of H, you know, where I had operated cameras like a Bolex, but I had never operated a video camera, and this was a video camera operating job, and I was like. So I figured, well, I can pan and tilt. I got that part. So, you know, I asked my friend, I mean, can you give me a quick rundown and just, you know, I'll apply, but you're going to have to get me up to speed. And he said, yeah, he would. And fortunately, because of the way that this was set up, because it was a studio, they had engineers. So all the tech stuff was handled, and I just needed to learn the controls, but, you know, just flew by the skin of my teeth, took a flying leap right into the business. And did that for about a year. The interesting thing with that was that at the time they had a lot of the camera operators were my peers. They were people fresh out of college. The higher up people, like the technical director and the director, those guys were more experienced. But over time, through attrition, they kind of moved on. And we moved up and started, you know, it was like the inmates running the asylum, and we would rotate, you know, for fun through the positions. So we all got to try TD, and we all got to try directing. And it was kind of crazy fun, you know, and we were getting paid to do it. But needless to say, that didn't last forever. And when that company ended, I realized that, you know, live television is not what I got into this for. And so I started looking around for people making movies, you know, at an entry level that I could get into. And through a local editor and cameraman named Bill Moore, who's, you know, still a big fixture in the filmmaking community now, somebody gave me his number, and I called him, and he knew a fellow who was making a 16 millimeter feature film on his credit cards. And I said, sure, you know, I want to come help. And I called this guy up, and I told him everything that was in my background that could help me out. You know, I was, you know, a fine art student. I had taken filmmaking classes. I also was a musician, you know, and I would write and record my own music. So I understood, you know, audio recording and using mics. And so what happened was that, you know, as a volunteer thing, he wasn't paying any money. But I went out there and, you know, I treated it like, you know, they were paying me $1 million, and I, you know, busted my butt, and I did whatever. My first day, they were shooting in Galveston, and I went out to Galveston, and you know, I was going to be a grip, and I didn't even really know what that was. But again, some of the guys still working in Houston, one fellow, Troy Webb, was there, and he kind of brought me up to speed on shiny boards and things like that. And something that was funny was that the UPM had forgotten to book a Nagra sound recorder. So then they needed one, and so everybody was freaking out. And at high school for performing in visual arts, there was an instructor named Patrick Coakley. who also later taught at U of H, and Michelle Mower, who's another local filmmaking icon. She had Pat Coakley in college, but I knew Pat Coakley had this warehouse like the one you see at the end of Citizen Kane, just, you know, shelves stacked with stuff, filmmaking equipment. And I said, Coakley's got to have a Nagra. So I called him, and sure enough, he did. And somebody ran the Nagra down to us in Galveston, and I got to be a hero and save the day. But to fast forward a little bit, I ended up rotating. I you know, in addition to gripping, I did like boom mic. When the sound mixer had to leave, he taught me how to operate it. So I did sound mixing. I did, you know, helped with the lights. I did a little bit of camera assisting. And when I had gotten out of college, I thought I wanted to be a director. That was where I had my sights set. But after working on that film, I saw, you know, that person with the camera setting all the lights, you know, that's the guy, you know, making the pictures. And I said, that's what I wanted to do. And so I got on that path. And while I was still in Houston, I, you know, started getting work as a camera operator. I was doing freelance at Joel Osteen's church. Used to be a venue called the Summit, and there were a lot of concerts and sporting events there. And so I would go there, and I would just operate all these sporting events and musical events. And so I was practicing my camera operating skills, which all that was predominantly video. But in the meantime, I was also doing film. I was working as a camera assistant. I started as a second, and a second. And, you know, some movies came through. A Dolph Lundgren movie called I Come in Peace was made in Houston while I was there. A television movie called Fulfillment of Mary Gray. RoboCop 2 shot in Houston. So I got to work on all of those. Plus I worked on, there was a lot of corporate stuff, which there still is. You know, and I was working with some of the local DPs like Yaroslav Vodanal and Scotty Smith, and, you know, learning from them. And, you know, when at a certain point around 1990, I realized, you know, it's kind of a small market, and there's these established people who really have it locked up. So if I'm going to be competing to grow and to become a cinematographer, you know, I don't know how many opportunities there are going to be for me. And I also, by this time, I've been doing it for a couple of years, and I realized how irregular freelance work was. You know, it was tough. And you know, you had to watch your money because you didn't have a regular paycheck. And there were a lot of sacrifices. You know, there were really long hours. So I just, at one point I decided that I was gonna make the move to Los Angeles. I moved to Los Angeles in July 1990, and I was really kind of under the illusion. But at that point, I had shot a few things, and I had a little reel on tape, and I was under the illusion that, you know, there was just so much work here, and I was immediately going to start working, and came to find out really quickly that that wasn't the case. And this was my first big lesson in the cardinal rule of success in this business. It's who you know. And, you know, in Houston, it was a small market. It was easy to get to know people. And I had gotten to know them. And then I moved to Los Angeles, and I had a couple of friends, but they were in kind of in the same position as me. There was nobody, I didn't know anybody in a hiring position. And my first few years, I was kind of, you know, all my friends and I were like, you know, we're going to make it in this business, and you're going to be a director, and I'm going to be a DP. After a while of kind of going nowhere, I realized, I had an epiphany, and I said, if I want to make a living in this business, I need to be not so much networking with my peers at my level. I need to be meeting the people who do this for a living. And so I kind of recalibrated my strategy. I also had made the decision when I went to LA that I wasn't going to go for camera assistant work, which is another thing that I think delayed me, because it's harder to get DP work. You know, there's less opportunities. you know, on a shoot, you might have, you know, at least 2 camera assistants, or if you have 2 cameras, maybe 3 or 4 camera assistants. But typically there's 1 DP unless there's another unit. So anyway, while I was, you know, looking for work, I would, you know, do stuff like in the early days, I actually just did temp office work. But I finally found a company that did camera operating gigs. So I was doing camera operating for live events and concerts again. And I also would do QC work at a post house. And then after a while, I did start to connect with some people. In the meantime, I had been applying for just anybody, you know, looking for a DP for a student shoot or a personal project. So I was getting experience as a shooter. I was building my reel. I was learning how to light. And my first breakthrough was working for Roger Corman at his Concord New Horizons. And for those of you who don't know, Roger Corman's a very famous B-movie producer from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. He's still active. He's still making movies. He's very proud of the fact that he doesn't put a lot of money into his movies, and he makes a lot of money. And he has a lot of formulas, like he'll use name actors, like, you know, for instance, Martin Sheen was in one of his movies. And the way he does that is he'll book them for 1 day. He'll only pay them for 1 day, but he'll shoot them in a way that they're spread out through the movie, and then he puts them on the, you know, the poster. And so it's like, oh, it's a Martin Sheen movie. You know, he also used to send people out to the mall with a clipboard with these proposed movie titles that didn't even exist. There was no script. And he would just say, oh, you know, he would get people walking by and say, which of these movies would you go see? And whichever one they picked, that's the one he would make. And a modern day equivalent of that is Sharknado. The title existed before the movie. There was no script, there was no story. Somebody just said, ooh, Sharknado, let's make that. But anyway, so working for Roger Corman, a lot of famous people came up under him. People like, he gave Jack Nicholson and Dennis Hopper some of their early opportunities. He gave Ron Howard his first directing opportunity. James Cameron worked with him as a model maker and a visual effects artist. Gail Ann Hurd, the guy who's shooting for Spielberg now, his name eludes me. But anyway, that DP was working at Concord. So it was just a lot of people came through there, and they used to call it Concord Film School. But it was good lessons because, you know, you didn't have all the resources, and you didn't have all the money, and you didn't have all the crew. And so you had to learn to be very efficient. You had to learn to plan. You had to learn to improvise, and you know, you didn't have the thing you wanted, so you had to figure out what's the next best thing, or what's another way to tell this story or to show this image. And so it made you think out of the box. You know, it's easy to be lazy if you have all the things you want, you know, because you just get the things you want and you don't have to stretch. But when you don't have a dolly, you know, then you use a wheelchair or whatever. I mean, that's just one example that most people probably already know. But there's just a lot of other things like that. You know, for instance, just a random example is I was at a train station once shooting a short film, and there was this couple going away, and they had this romantic moment. But we were down at Union Station in Los Angeles, and literally nobody was there. It was completely empty. You know, we had our little crew, and then we had our cast. So the way that we solved that is we went to a little bit of a tighter lens and had the crew walk, you know, some of them were walking this way, some of them were walking that way at different distances, but, you know, they were out of focus. So you couldn't tell it was basically the same 6 people walking back and forth, but boom, you know, we had a crowded train station. So, you know, things like that. And I could give you tons of examples, but, you know, it's so critical to be able to think that way and be resourceful. Because even I'll tell you, man, I've worked on, you know, huge budgets, And no matter what the budget is everybody always wants more than they've got in the pot. So you're always trying to figure out how can we stretch this. So it's a really good habit to have, a really good lesson to learn. Another thing that I did, I remember when I first got hired, the producer said to me, you can pick one scene every day to make look great, but after that, you just got to make your day. Just shoot it and get it in the can, which I took as a personal challenge because, I'm an artist and I wanted everything to look great. So I'm like, how can I cheat this system? And one of the thoughts that I came up with was every day I would come in at least 30 minutes early, 30 minutes before everybody else. And I would walk through all the sets. Now this was a studio with flats and sets. And I would visualize the scenes, and on paper I would do a lighting diagram of where I wanted the lights, and at the beginning of the day I would hand that to the lighting crew. The first set, obviously I was with them, I was supervising, but then as we were shooting that, they would move on without my supervision, using my diagrams as a guide to rough in the lights, so that by the time we were finished in the first set and moved to the second set, everything was roughed in. I had to turn it on, tweak it, and off we went. So that was one time-saving innovation that I came up with. And there were others, but I would always try to say 2 or 3 sets ahead. And, being able to stay 2 or 3 sets ahead, it requires that you have enough equipment to do that. Sometimes you don't. It also requires that you've got the crew to do that, because typically I at least like to have 1 or 2 lighting people still on set in case I need adjustments while the other people are off doing the work. But anyway, those are just some examples, and along the way, I also did work for a company, called Full Moon, which does horror films. Jeff Walton, who is a Houston composer, a very interesting story. I did this one film for them, and it was really cool because it was my first time shooting a feature on 35 millimeter. I'd shot 35 for some commercials and promos, but I'd never shot it on a feature. And this was my first 35 millimeter film and my first anamorphic film. So that was super fun working with anamorphic lenses. And it was a horror film, which I really enjoyed. But we only had 3 lenses and we had to shoot it in 7 days. So again, I went back to my training, and I was like, how do I get 50 pounds into my 10 pound box? And we just came up with a lot of stuff, and part of that was keeping coverage very simple and not doing a lot of takes. Fortunately, the director was just a maniac. I mean, that was kind of his MO anyway. So in fact, he's gone on to he makes like 4-day features now. So way beyond what I want to do, but that's kind of his thing. Anyway, the funny thing about this movie was we shot it, it came out, I was happy with it. I was listening to it. The music was really terrific. And I was like, Jeff Walton, who's that? And I looked him up and I'm like, oh my gosh, Jeff's in Houston. So that was just a super cool connection. And we, neither one of us had any connection to the other being involved with that. It just, it's just, that's the way it kind of went down. And Jeff had done a lot of soundtracks for that company's videos. But anyway, I built up, doing indie features, and then a fellow who I mentored in Houston, a guy who went to Jersey Village High School. Now, one of my classmates at Jersey Village High School is a guy named Jeff Johnson, and when I was in LA, I come to find out that Jeff. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. So anyway, I get a call one day from Jeff, and Jeff is teaching drama at Jersey Village, and he says, "I've got this one student who's really got shows a lot of promise. Would you talk to him? Would you mentor him?" And I said yes. And anyway, this fellow turned out to be Joseph Kahn, who you've undoubtedly seen his videos. He's done a lot of videos for Britney Spears and Taylor Swift, so I brought him on set and, gave him the benefit of my experience. He went off to NYU. And then when he would visit LA, I'd let him crash at my place. But long story short, he blew up into this really huge music video director. And at one point he said, Brad, do you want to come shoot with me? And I said, sure. And so I had a run of working with Joseph, where I did all these big music videos for Britney Spears and Eminem and Nelly. So that kind of boosted my career up into that realm, and also commercials. And an interesting side note about Jeff Johnson is that Jeff ended up getting out of teaching, and he moved out to LA and got in the art department. And now Jeff works on, huge shows. He's a property master. He works on shows like Parenthood. And you could look him up on IMDb. I don't remember all his stuff. Right now he's in Europe. He's on some big, I think it's a Netflix show that's going through Europe. But anyway, so, a lot of hometown people who have gone on to have very successful careers. But anyway, to fast forward, I was doing big music videos, and then the music video industry kind of collapsed, and a lot of that was precipitated by illegal downloading, the demise of MTV showing videos. And so what was once a really booming industry just collapsed. I mean, there's still some big ones, but most of them are kind of small, dinky things now. And so I focused on doing commercials for a while, which I had a good run with that. And then recently I've gotten back into more of a focus on narrative filmmaking, where I've done television shows, I've done feature films. We just shot one in July in a city called Petaluma in Northern California, that was called California Christmas, and is coming out on a streaming platform, a national streaming platform, this holiday season. And that was my first experience working under the new COVID safety protocols, which, that's a whole thing too. One thing I'll interject here is it's been an interesting time to be in this business, because when I started, you principally, anything that really looked good was shot on film. So you had to have a film camera, you had to be able to buy film, you had to pay for processing, and typically transfer, video transfer, the editing. When I started editing, it was just manual editing. It was editing on flatbeds. Bill Moore actually had the very first digital editing system in Houston. It was called an EMC2, and you didn't even digitize video back then. It would synchronize tape machines, and it would run them. But it's been an interesting time, because since I've started, now you can shoot high-speed 4K video on your iPhone. Editing software is super affordable. You can get Resolve for free. It's really democratized the process. It's really opened it up to a lot of people. I belong to a lot of film groups on Facebook, and I see people, in third world countries making movies that, sometimes they have really good, impressive visual effects, and everybody's got access to a good camera now. And also I've seen the evolution from principally shooting on 35 and 16 to digital cameras. I worked with one of the first digital HD cameras, the Sony F900, which is one of the cameras that Lucas used on the Star Wars prequels. And I shot a couple of movies with that. In fact, I shot one in Houston with a director named Elizabeth Harrison called Love and Mary. We shot that in 2006. Then I remember when the first RED camera was proposed, and everybody, there was like a 3D printed model of the chassis, and people were so skeptical. A 4K camera, and the price point was I mean, it was expensive, but I think it was like $25,000. So it was still a lot less than most of the 35 millimeter counterpart cameras. And a lot of people, I remember, were calling it vaporware, saying that, it's just bullshit. They're trying to get people's money. But it ended up not being bullshit. And, it's evolved into a a terrific camera system that they shoot movies like the Hobbit trilogy with. And then of course, Arri was a little late getting into the game, but they finally got into the game with the Alexa. And the Alexa stayed under 4K for a while. They were 3.2K, 2.8K, and then some of these platforms like Netflix imposed a 4K limit. They said that any content created for Netflix has to be generated in native 4K, which excluded the Alexas, and that was the catalyst they needed to create 4K cameras. But even so, you still had movies like the Avengers shooting on the lower resolution cameras, now we've got the Panavision DXL. We've got so many other. I mean, there are so many cameras just coming all the time, and they've developed the new lens systems, the large format cameras with the LPL mount lens systems. So it's been an amazing time to have had my career. And also, things like LED lighting technology. When I started, it was pretty much tungsten and HMI and KinoFlow. And now you have very affordable bicolor LED panels. You've got LED Fresnel lights, which are super bright, super powerful. And I especially love the RGB stuff, like the Arri sky panels, the Geminis. Somebody was showing me another prosumer brand the other day that's got an RGB panel. The tubes like the quasars. I use those a lot. I mean, they're my main light these days. When I shot the movie in Petaluma in July, I just, for so much of the stuff, I used either the Arri sky panels. I had 3 Arri sky panels, and I think I had 8 4-foot quasar tubes. And one of the cool things about those quasar tubes is I had a bar scene to shoot, and we only had 2 days in the bar, but we didn't have a lot of time to screw around. We really had to get down to it and get down to shooting. And I wanted to put some color in the bar, and it had a low ceiling, and you could really see the ceiling, so there was no hiding anything. So what I decided to do is fix those quasars all the way around the ceiling. And the beauty about these quasars is that they're battery powered. So I didn't have to run cables, which would have taken, probably another couple of hours to have them, do all of that. So we had battery powered quasars that we just zip tied up into the ceiling, and boom, we had a color. We didn't have to use gels. I mean, that was another thing, back in the day, if you wanted color, you had to get a gel, and gels were kind of expensive, and you had to pick your battles. You only got so many gels. Now you have RGB lights, so you have a theoretically unlimited palette. In practice, there are some limitations, and they've got some higher end LEDs that add other components like amber and I forget what all the other colors are, but in addition to RGB, they have some other LEDs to get into the mix to refine the breadth of colors even more. But I just wanted to take that detour, to say what an amazing experience it's been to see all of these tools come into being. And it's one of those things that I have it now, and it's just like, a microwave oven or an Apple TV. It's like, you wonder, how did I ever get by before this existed? It's so essential. And that's another thing too, is as far as distribution is concerned. Can you guys hear me? Jenny seems to be frozen.
I'm eating yogurt. I can hear you.
Oh, okay. When you were frozen, I thought maybe my program had locked up.
Oh, no, sorry. No, I was eating yogurt, so I turned off my video.
Oh, okay. Oh, no problem. But the other, it just goes on. You have things like YouTube and Vimeo and TikTok, and you have the ability. Not only can you create, but you have the ability to reach audiences. You have resources like this, for instance, or Stage 32. So many terrific things. So it's just been a really wonderful experience seeing what's available to filmmakers now, aspiring filmmakers. And I mean, really, whereas at one time you could certainly say, there's a lot of challenges and barriers to me getting in the business, those have largely gone away. I mean, it's really coming down to, a person's ambition and tenacity and talent. And, kind of like I mentioned much earlier on, the key in this business is it's who you know. And I was having a conversation with a young lady I mentor in Houston just yesterday, where she was kind of frustrated about not getting work. And so I just, told her, I said, you need to be visible. People need to know you. If people don't know you, you're not going to get hired. And what that means is you show up. In a world where we don't have quarantine, that means you go to the events, you go to Swamp, you go to First Thursdays at Cafe Brazil that the Houston Film Commission hosts. And now that a lot of those things have gone virtual, you go to the virtual ones. First Thursdays is virtual. You participate in the filmmaking forums. There's, I would say, maybe 10 different Texas or Houston-based filmmaker groups in Facebook. And don't just read it and stalk it, because that doesn't make you visible. Post content, make comments, engage people. That's how you become known. That's how you become known in the community. Especially if you give value, it's, I always liken it to it's like a friendship. It's like if you have a friend, or if you're dating somebody, you don't do it passively. You share things that will interest them. You treat them to dinner. You give them gifts. You do things to make their lives better, or help ease their burden, or solve their problems. And it's the same thing in a dynamic, beneficial relationship in a career network. Is you bring value to it. You take the time to get to know the people. You don't just look at them as a paycheck and say, hire me, because nobody's going to hire you if you do that. People, it's a competitive business. There's a lot of people want to get into it, and people get bugged all the time of, hire me. And even though I am theoretically sympathetic, I can tell you that is kind of annoying. It's like that friend of yours who never really contributes, but just always wants people to do things for them, and loan me money, do this, but then they don't ever do anything for you. So you got to look at it that way, and you got to say, how do I bring value? And you invest time, just like you would with a friend. You invest time. You look at their social media. You check them out on Facebook, on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. If you can afford it, I highly recommend IMDb Pro. If you can't, just do IMDb. Do a Google search. Put in your due diligence. The more of that you do, the more you're doing than your competitor. And that's the thing, is like you're shoulder to shoulder with everybody who wants to get into the business. How do you get a lead? And one of that is putting in the extra effort to get to know somebody. And so when you have a conversation with them, it's not about filmmaking. It's not about what can you do for me, but you understand that, this person likes collies. They breed collies, and this person likes to go camping, and this person likes Indian food. And so you can engage them. You say, there's this great new Indian restaurant that you should hear about. And of course, you could send them filmmaking stuff too. Look at these new lenses that came out. You can share that in the filmmaking groups. You can send it to them on a one-to-one basis. But the point is you are creating value in that relationship. You are becoming someone they like and they want to know. And this is what building a network is all about. And that's how you create a community out of which you will get hired. And yes, it's a lot of work, but it's a competitive business. This is not for the meek. It's not for the lazy. You've got to put in the time. And that is the lesson I have learned. I mean, I've been in this business, like I said, 33 years. I've made my own mistakes. I am fundamentally a very shy person, and I had to learn how to overcome that, because otherwise I was going to sink. And that was what I was telling this young lady yesterday. She also is, you know, not gregarious. She's not, you know, fundamentally social. And I'm like, you know, there are ways to make this work. And, you know, we all have our different challenges. Some people are very gregarious and it comes naturally. But I have been in this business all these years, and I've seen people succeed and I've seen people fail. And, you know, there's a lot of things that I could tell you about things that work and things that don't work. But the one thing that's more important than anything else, again, is your network and your community. It's more important than your talent. I mean, you know this. You look on television, you go to a movie, and there's a filmmaker that makes shit films, and they keep getting hired to make shit films. Why? You know, it's because of their relationships. It's because of their network. You know, I can't tell you. I mean, as a prideful artist, you want to think that, oh, you know, the magic wand of my talents is what makes everything wonderful, and that's why people will hire me, and it just isn't. You know, so that's one of the lessons that I learned and will impart to you. Now I know that Jenny's asking about some resources. Well, I'll tell you what, I will put my email address in the chat, and I invite you all to email me with questions. I have like pages of links that I have categorized under different job categories, which have resources. They're articles, they're you know, they're groups like Stage 32, lots of stuff that is of interest, and far too much for me to cover right now. You know, it covers everything from screenwriting to producing to PAing to directing. There's stuff on networking, there's stuff on doing a resume, there's stuff on fundraising, film festivals. I mean, it just goes on. So whatever your interests are, you can browse through that. And then I'll put on my thinking cap, I'll also send, you know, anybody who emails me, I'll send you a list of some of the Facebook filmmaking groups, which are really good to engage with. Stage 32 is kind of nice because it's a kind of a hybrid social media, because you can get on it and post stuff and network, but they also have a lot of classes and webinars, which are for fees that, you know, you have to pay for them, but they're not ridiculous. They're like, you know, $49, and oftentimes they go on sale, and they have contests. And my personal experience is that the educational material is probably the more worthwhile. I mean, I find in, you know, looking at the networking that most of the people that are visible are wannabes. You know, they're aspiring filmmakers who are just nowhere in a position to help me out. Somebody else starting out in their career who's looking for a collaborator, you know, that might be good if you want to, you know, do a film and you don't have a lot of money and you're just looking for people to pitch in. You might meet some collaborators there. But anyway, and there's others. There's, you know, No Film School is another really good website. But like I said, email me and I will do that. Also, you know, if you want any feedback, you know, on your resume, if you want to mentor, you know, I'm open to all these things. I've you know, mentored people out for many years, and I actually have a Facebook group myself. It's a private group. It's called Houston Young Filmmakers Group, and it started because I was mentoring just randomly people like Jenny and Scott No and Temple Northup at some of the local schools had kind of sent some individuals my way, and I realized I was, you know, had this handful of local filmmakers I was mentoring, and I came into town and I said, you know, you guys want to get together and just meet, and so we did, and I thought, well, you know, I think what's going to help these people even more than me talking to them is for them to meet some local filmmakers. So, you know, I invited people like Molly Vernon and Scott, and, you know, they would come and meet with the group. And then I went back to LA, but the group kept going, and we were meeting in person at the local foods on Kirby. And so every month they would get together, and we would have, lots of people. Like we had Brian Eckelmeyer, who's, one of the best first ACs in town, came and talked to him. We had director Wayne Slayton. We had Larry McKee, who's a terrific DP in town. But since quarantine, what's happened is it's all gone virtual. So now I'm back in the loop, and I've also opened it up to, sometimes I have LA filmmakers as the guest. And last month we had Michelle Moore talk to us, and I kind of interviewed her, and we went through her career, how she became interested in film, her early steps of how she got into the business, how she got her breaks, how she got the opportunity to direct her first feature film, how that got sold and led to more work, how she was involved with the Houston community through organizations like Southwest Alternative Media Project, and how she came to own and run a distribution company. I mean, Michelle's a pretty amazing person. That session, I think it's almost 3 hours, but I recorded it and it's in the group, so you could watch it. So if you're interested in becoming part of that group, which, I also post, when I see resources or articles or opportunities, sometimes even local job opportunities for young filmmakers, that goes in the group. And I encourage people to post, the members to post questions and materials and opportunities. Some of the young people have, they've needed collaborators on some of their personal projects, and they'll post there. So, but anyway, email me if you want, or if, after this is over, if you have a question that you wished you had answered, you can go ahead and do that. So then I guess the other thing that I'll touch base on, because Jenny was saying you guys are probably interested in, was the COVID safety protocols. And again, if you email me, I have like a PDF of what they gave us. And if you ask for it, I'll send it to you. When I called my agent to tell him about this job, he said, this was I guess it was in June that I called him, because we started in July. I drove up June the 29th. And he said, this is the first feature that I've heard of going. And my agent's at APA, which is one of the big agencies in town. I mean, they rep DPs who do much bigger films than I do. So I felt very fortunate that I was working when none of his other feature clients were working. And it was early days, and we did not yet have these COVID safety protocols, which are coming out now that the unions have negotiated and they've kind of formalized them. But our producers negotiated directly with the Screen Actors Guild, and they came up with a set of safety protocols that we were going to follow. And what that involved was everybody, cast and crew. Because most of us were working remotely, there were a few local hires for day play actors, but most of us had come from Los Angeles up to Petaluma, which is about 30 minutes north of San Francisco. And if you don't know, that's about a 9-hour drive. And it's about an 8-hour drive. But anyway, they put us all in a hotel, and for the most part, they put us on one floor because they wanted to keep us away from other guests. And there were a few extra people that they ended up putting on the 3rd floor, but most of us were on the 4th floor. They tested everybody. They tested us all before we started filming. And originally they were going to do the blood tests. And I was dreading this because they were also good. They were going to test us, and they did test us every 3 days. So we did the initial test, and then every 3 days after that, we would get another test. And I just hate getting stuck by needles. So I was just beside myself at the prospect of this blood test. And they did the first one. And to make matters worse, they used those little spring-loaded needles that they use for people with diabetes. And the guy couldn't make it work, and he kept jabbing me and squeezing my finger. I was like, oh my God. I'm like, I'm not going to survive this. Well, fortunately, SAG said, no, that's not the test we want. We want a swab. And so they had to retest us but it was much more merciful. And I've heard stories about these swabs that they stick right up into your brain. That's not the ones they used with us. They just went right inside your nose on both sides and swirled it around. But we had that every 3 days. The other thing is when we came to set at call time, they had a little, sensor thermometer that they would put up to your head and take your temperature, everybody's temperature, arriving to set at call time, and then leaving at the end of the day after wrap, they'd take your temperature again. We had to wear masks all the time. The only people who didn't wear masks was the actors when they were on set. When we were scouting, typically on a scout, the director, the DP, the AD, we all get in a big van and go together. But we didn't do that. It was self-drive, so everybody had to drive themselves on the scouts, and also to set. They didn't have any vans to and from the hotel. Everybody self-drove to the locations. In the past, food lunches are catered, and it's kind of like a little buffet line where you get whatever you want, or they serve you, but it's a buffet line of these open metal trays. Well, that was gone. Everything was box lunches. And we would pre-order, a few days in advance, because there's people with special diets, gluten-free, or, like me, they're vegetarian. So we would pre-order, not the greatest food, not as good as what I remember, but it was good enough. We got by. There was no, in the past we would have a big cooler of iced tea and a big cooler of lemonade. None of that. Everything was like individual bottles and cans. There was no common cooler. If you wanted a cooler, you had to bring your own cooler. I had a little cooler I wheeled around with me, and I took advantage of that to stash some watermelon in it, which was nice. Craft services, there was no open foods like nuts or tortilla chips or guacamole. I mean, everything was sealed packages. When we were on set, now that was another thing, is the crew size was limited. We had to have a smaller crew. So, we only had one camera instead of two cameras, which might have made sense on this shoot. But we had one camera. I had a first assistant camera, a second assistant camera, and a DIT who really didn't come to set much. And then my lighting crew was two electrics and two grips. So, and typically this company does like 4 in each department, but we only had 2. And this was all in, the protocols, required that we had a smaller crew. So, again, leaning back on some of the background that I told you guys about is, I really had to, consider what my resources and manpower was and plan accordingly, because I had to make my days. We didn't, people didn't want to go overtime. So we didn't go overtime. We might have gone over a few minutes here and there, but I mean, pretty much it was 12-hour days. Another thing that was very significant is when we were on set, if we were outside, we didn't have to do this. But if we were inside, if we were in a house or an office building, if we wanted to move the camera or adjust the lights, the actors all had to leave, So anytime my guys came onto set to move stuff, the actors had to leave. So that was a consideration, and it was a little bit of a, it took some time. And then there were a whole set of protocols that the makeup and wardrobe people had. And I honestly don't know exactly what that stuff was. It may be in that PDF if it interests you. And again, if it's something you want to know about, let me know, and I could put you in touch with the people who did those departments. But, for instance, the makeup people had to wear a face shield, which most of us just had the masks, but they also had a face shield. And typically they would take the actors down to base camp, which we shot 14 days, and 8 of our 14 days were at this dairy farm, this ranch, and the house and the barns were kind of in this one area. And then there was this long road that went up to the main street into town. And way up there was base camp, where all the motor homes and stuff was. And a lot of times they would take the actors back there to do their makeup and their wardrobe. And that was kind of a time consuming thing. So, but those are the main things that I remember about the safety protocols. And the other thing that kind of happened to us too was when they did the initial test before we started filming, there was a delay getting the results. Since then, I think they've got more rapid tests, but the turnaround was slower. And as a result, our start date got pushed 3 or 4 days. So we ended up getting delayed. And then about 2/3 of the way into the film, one person tested positive. It was a day player. It was somebody who only came in for 1 day. And so what they did is they shut us down. I mean, they shut us down in the middle of a day. We were like 2 hours away from wrap, and they got the news, and they came in and they shut us down. And they said, everybody's going to get retested, and then we'll restart. And they anticipated that would be like a day delay. But again, because of the delays in getting the results, it was 3.5 days that we were down. And what happened was they had added a day. We were going to have 15 days to shoot. But because of that, we had this one actor who's on a television show who had to go back to work. And we were going to lose him. So we had to drop our 15th day. We weren't able to shoot that. And but what we did is the director and I ended up doing some pickups, which is an interesting story because we shot that film on a red weapon, an 8K red weapon, and we did the pickups on this guy's Blackmagic 6K pocket camera, which is like a $2,000 camera, and he had bought these lenses with kind of a small diameter front element, and we were shooting anamorphic on this too, by the way. We had Kawa. We were using a vintage Kawa anamorphic lenses. But because of insurance reasons and because they didn't want to keep the crew on, we weren't able to use the red camera for our pickups. So we shot on this guy's Pocket 6K, and he had this front anamorphic element, which would do a horizontal squeeze into the little spherical lens. And we used that for the pickups, and we shot several actual dialogue scenes with it. And we also had, during the shoot, like on our days off, he and I had gone out and gotten B-roll of the house and, cows in fields and birds flying through the air and, all that kind of stuff that you like to make your edit nice. And he also had a drone. So he was flying his drone, shooting a lot of stuff. But the reason I bring that up is we did the color grade a couple of weeks ago, and that little Pocket 6K camera is just amazing. I mean, it intercuts. There's no way anybody can ever tell looking at the film which was Pocket 6K and which was Red Epic. Obviously, as a user on set, there's more functionality to the Red camera. You have things like HDRX. You can shoot a faster, high-speed frame rate. There's other qualities about it. It's got a better dynamic range overall, but practically speaking, just somebody looking at the screen is never going to be able to tell the difference. So it was just a super camera to use, and I highly recommend it if anybody's looking to shoot a project or buy a camera. But I think I feel kind of talked out in terms of self-generated content. But if you guys have any questions, if there's anything you'd like more detail about, if you have any questions, pertinent to your own interests or projects, please put them in the chat, and I'm happy to answer them. Or if Jenny's got any questions, I don't know. Maybe I talked too much. Maybe I gave it all away. I don't know.
Well, something that you were talking about recently, which I think the fact that you have an agent, and so that's one of the things where, especially when you're
you've frozen.
Oh, did I?
I heard you say especially when you're, and then you froze.
Oh yeah, it is unstable. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, so when you were talking about having an agent, because that's something that writers and directors and actors tend to be a bit more familiar with, but the fact that, below the line crew also have, agents like DPs and
Yeah,
things like that.
yeah.
And so, but it also seems like you're also finding your own work and then telling your agent about it
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
after the fact. So
yeah.
can you talk more about kind of what that process is and how helpful having an agent has been, or,
Yeah, yeah.
you know?
So I guess let me preface this by saying, look, everybody in this business, including me, wants the surefire technique for landing work and success. And I can tell you with a pretty good confidence that that one surefire technique does not exist. And really, again, it boils down to the mantra that I'm hitting you over the head with, that it's who you know. And it's so important to put in the time to build a network. One of the things I was telling Amanda, the young lady I was mentoring, is I said, look, this is a lot of work, but you're freelance. And, most people have to show up every day, 9 to 5 and do their job, wherever they work, at the office or the grocery store or, the doctor's clinic. And they put in their time. So you don't sit at home just waiting for the phone to ring. You have a job too. You get, in front of the computer, you're engaging with these people, you're doing the phone calls, you're doing the meetings. That's your job. I tell people I'm professionally unemployed, because literally what I do for a living, most of what I do for a living is not make movies. Most of what I do for a living is look for work, is look for new clients. That thing that most people do only occasionally, which is be out of work and put in applications and respond to ads, we do continually. Even when you're working, you're looking for work. Um, so um, so that's just, it's a different paradigm. Now, that's not to say that there aren't office jobs. There are office jobs, but typically office jobs or full-time jobs in the filmmaking business are not the creative jobs. The more creative jobs are freelance. So if you want to do something creative, freelance is where you're going to land, and you've got to put in the time. And like I said, it's not just, making the connections, but it is, making quality connections, relationships that you bring value to, people that you check in with, people that you stay in contact with. Because, just because you meet somebody once, again, it's just like a friend. If you have a friend that you haven't seen in a long time, they may not think to invite you to the movie they're going to that night, because they've been hanging out with somebody else. And it's not because they don't like you. It's just because you're not the first person on their brain. So you've got to check in. You've got to keep the visibility going on. So the reason I say this, as I was doing a preface, popular media gives us a very incorrect impression of what agents and unions do. You have the idea that you're going to work and that you're going to meet an agent or you're going to get in the union, and that these entities are going to take you and cultivate you and build your career for you. And it's not true. I mean, from the beginning to the end, the only person who's going to build your career is you. It's all on you. You're all alone. So on the one hand, that sucks, because I wish somebody was fighting the good fight for me. But on the other hand, knowing that is empowering. It's better to have the knowledge rather than labor under an illusion and get nowhere fast. But I thought, the first thing that happened to me was getting in the union. And I thought, when I get in the union, I'm going to be doing all these union jobs and I'm going to be so busy. But it's not true. Now I know the union is different in Texas. It's not the same, but here in California, and if you want to do the big jobs, you have to be a union camera operator. And there are filmmakers in Houston who are in the union. I know Brian is in the union. John Sheeran is in the union. But really what the union is like a ticket to a party. If you are in the union, then you are eligible to work on the big studio movies, the big commercials. All the big stuff is typically union. But it's another one of those things that that if you don't know people who hire for union jobs, you're going to be paying dues and you're not going to be getting the benefit of that. You're not going to be getting that work, which is one of the reasons I tell people, you know, hold off. Don't just join the union. It's like, wait until, you know, you've had a couple of offers for union work that you've had to turn down. And then you're like, okay, you know, maybe now's the time. And I'm going to take a moment for an aside here with respect to the union. Anybody who wants to work in a craft that involves a union, even if you're staying in Houston for right now and don't aspire to move somewhere else, piece of advice for you is call contract services. And again, if you want to write me and ask, I'll give you their contact information. Contract services administers admissions into the union. So if you want to join Local 600, which is the camera union, or Local 80, which is the grip union, or 728, which is the lighting union, and there's one for script supervisors and craft services and pretty much everything else. But if you do want to, call contract services and find out what documentation you need. The reason I say this is if you wait until you're ready to join the union, they're going to tell you something like, you need 100 days of experience. And you've got to provide call sheets and time cards and deal memos. Now, I just picked that arbitrary number of 100 days because that's what it was when I joined the camera union. It's different with the different locals, and it could be different with the camera union now. That's why I say call them up, find out what it is, and right now, just go ahead and start saving that. Create a file and save that documentation so that if the day comes, when the day comes, and you want to join, you have the documentation, because I can't tell you what a pain in the butt it is to try and get that retroactively from production companies that may be limited liability companies that have shut down. People are out of the business. You know, somebody's hard drive crashed. They, you know, all of that stuff. Trying to track that down retroactively is insane. So start collecting it now. But anyway, getting back to my point, being in the union will not send work your way typically. I mean, that in and of itself is still on you. And same thing with agents. Now, I think it's different with cast. I think it's different with actors. I'm not an actor, so I don't know. But typically, I think with actors, they do send their clients on auditions. But my experience with agents, and I've been with some of the big ones. I've been with Datner Despoto. I've been with Paradigm. I'm currently with APA. But by and large, they do not find work for you. That's just not what they do. And it's not just me. I've talked to a lot of other directors of photography at various levels in their career, people who do bigger movies than me, people who do smaller movies. I've talked to directors. It's really the same thing. It's like they just don't send you much work. The other thing is that agents definitely don't do is they definitely do not cultivate careers. And that's something that I think pop culture tells us, is that they sign, you know, a young up and comer and develop them. And that's, you know, you may find an exception. There's exceptions to every rule, but by and large, you have to understand that everybody in this business, including agents, are in it to make money. And 10% of squat is squat. So they want clients that already have an income worth taking 10% of. And I know that can be disappointing because that's not what anybody wants to hear, including me. And that's not what popular media has taught us. But that is the reality, is that agents are mercenary. You know, they are looking to take 10% of an income that's worth taking 10% of. So given all this, when I tell people this, typically they say, so then what's the point of having an agent? I'm just giving them money. And the other thing that is shocking to these people is like, okay, so if they don't get you the work, if you get the work, or they're your pre-existing clients, you don't have to pay them 10%, right? Well, that's not true. The contract you sign with an agent says you give them 10% of everything, no matter where it comes from. And so people go, well, what the hell? Why have an agent? Typically, what my agent does for me, the value that they bring is negotiating my deals. So on one level, negotiating a salary can be a little bit adversarial. So I want to be, it's kind of you want to be a good cop, bad cop, where I'm like, oh, I want to work on your movie and let's be artists together, and let the agent be the bad cop, and, obviously everybody knows behind the scenes, you're telling that agent, take it or ask for more. But they're the face of the bad cop. And, there's jobs where I tell the agent, I want this job, don't lose it for me. Don't fight them too hard. But they will negotiate my deals. And, sometimes it's not even necessarily the money. Sometimes it's, the accommodations, or they negotiate my, the fact that I get a copy of the material, which, for a DP is pretty typical anyway, but you'd be surprised. You really always want that in your contract, because some people are a little slippery about that. It could be your airfare, it could be, it's typical to have parity between the director and the DP. So if the director goes first class, they would send the DP first class. If the director has a certain grade of hotel, the DP would have a similar grade of hotel. Another thing, they negotiate per diem, which, for those who don't know, if they send you away on location, out of, where they have to put you up at a hotel, typically they'll give you a per diem anywhere between maybe $25 and $50 a day, which is, for the meals that production doesn't give you. It's for your expenses because they're taking you away from home. So that's the kind of thing. And now here's the other thing, is that there's something called an agency fee. And typically I ask my agent to get that. And what that means is that the client pays the 10%. So I don't pay the 10%. It doesn't come out of my pay. And also, that's 10% that doesn't show up on my income for taxes. And I find that most clients are amenable to paying the 10%. So it's kind of cash flow neutral for me. And the other thing about having an agent is quite frankly, there's cachet to it. It's like, if you have an agent, then you must be somebody. Or, conversely, they look at somebody who's supposed to be a big time filmmaker, and they go, well, why don't you have an agent? So, but it's and there are big guys, there are big people who don't have agents too. So, but this is a lesson I've learned, and I would extend it even to awards. Like, I won the MTV VMA Moon Man. Hey, Kathy, hand me that thing. I won the MTV VMA Moon Man for Moby's "We Are All Made of Stars" music video. Here he is, if you don't believe me. Anyway, but I won that, and I swear to God, when it happened, I thought the phone was going to be ringing off the hook, and nobody called me. I didn't get a single job or a single client. I've had articles about my work published in magazines like American Cinematographer, ICG, which is the camera union's magazine. I'm a member of the Canadian Society of Cinematographers. All of these things, are things that somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought, oh, this is going to get me more work. This is going to get me publicity. This is going to get me clients. And it just didn't. I mean, it's just a hard reality that it just comes down to me. Now I'm going to give you the caveat that somebody may tell you a different story, because look, there are no universal rules in life. There are exceptions to what I'm telling you. I can only tell you my own personal experience, but I do think if you are prepared to be, the sole guardian of your career, if somebody helps you, that's great. That's a bonus, right? Just don't rely on that, because relying on that is like relying on going down to the local convenience store and buying a lottery ticket and relying on that to cash out. I mean, if you're relying on that, well, you're going to be sitting around for a long time. So as long as you ultimately take responsibility in every way and see these things not as the silver bullet to launch your career into the stratosphere, but as just another tool. And I'm not saying they're not valuable. All of those things are valuable. There's value, if in nothing else, than cachet. Cachet is something. It's another pellet on the scale weighing in your favor. But I have just never, ever encountered in all this time, that one big thing that made a huge change. The closest to that would be certain people I have met. I mean, certain people I have met have made a big difference. For instance, Joseph Kahn, the fact that I mentored him and developed a relationship with him, and he brought me on. I mean, that took my career to a new level. And that was through a guy I had gone to high school with, Jeff Johnson. And that's a lot of the times, the people you're networking with is not even, the opportunity is not even necessarily going to come from that person, but maybe somebody they introduce you to or somebody they recommend you to. There's a producer friend of mine that I've worked with out here years ago, who he's gone on and like he's produced some of the Deadpool movies. And I've never worked for this guy. He's never hired me. And I wish he would, but I mean, typically it's the directors who pick their DPs. So even if this guy is recommending me, I mean, the director's going to have who they want. But what did happen is that this guy is the person who recommended me for Love and Mary, which was the film I shot in Houston, which is to me so random. This guy that, I worked with him on a movie in Brazil, so it's just, you just never know. And another thing I'll tell you about networking is be nice to everybody. I mean, even people you don't like. It's just, there's no reason ever to go off and pee in your own well. If you don't like them, then steer clear of them and don't work with them again. But don't have a confrontation. The caveat I would add is if it's a safety issue, you always have to stand up for safety. So that's one thing. But if it's not a safety issue, if it's just a personality thing, then just steer clear of them and just try to put positivity out there. Because things like that can come back to you. Just because you have your own perspective, other people can see it another way. And if they see you, acting aggressively or belligerently, that's something that can follow you. And you'll never even know about it. You'll just miss out on jobs and you won't know why. And the other thing is be nice to everybody, because the person who's doing craft services on the movie today, next year they may be producing something. They may be directing something. People on movie sets. I mean, they typically have a bigger game that they're playing than just being in a subservient role. So you just never know, and you want people to remember you well, and I also try to be supportive. Like another piece of advice I'll give you guys is if you want to get hired again, when you get on a job, when you get hired to be a PA or a camera assistant or whatever, is be the kind of employee that you would want to have. Is do the extra work, put in the extra time. Don't complain, be diplomatic, show up early, leave late. When I'm on shoots and I notice the PAs and there are people who are just Johnny on the spot. Something needs to be done. Oh, there's that person, and there's that person again. And they're always the first person in line. Somebody needs to sweep the floor. They're sweeping the floor. They're taking out the trash. They're taking the initiative to go wrangle background. I notice those people, and I will tell you that I make a point of introducing myself to them, and I ask them what their career goal is, and then I will help them out. I will give them advice. I will introduce them to mentors. There's been several people like that. There's a young lady out here right now named Phelan Morrell who worked on a movie called Sanitatum in Houston. She was in the art department. And she just shook her tail. I mean, and she was a department of one. And, she was set dressing. She wasn't the whole art department. She was set dressing, and she was a department of one, but she was always on top of stuff. And she didn't have to ask. She knew what the camera was seeing. She would look at the monitor. She took initiative. And that's another thing, is listen to what's going on set, understand and anticipate needs. Don't wait for somebody to tell you something. If nobody's telling you anything and you're not picking something up, ask somebody if they need help. Can I help you with this? Do you need help with that? Now on a union shoot, they're not going to let you carry camera gear, for instance. But if it's a non-union shoot, yeah, they might. And but even if you can't carry camera gear, I mean, there's maybe they want a coffee, maybe they want a water. I don't know, whatever you can do. Just never be standing around, because if you're standing around, people notice you. And if you're standing around, you're not essential. You know, you want to be essential. You want to be the hardest working person on set. And you know, people will become invested in your success, you know, because they'll be like, that person's really trying. That person is standing out, whereas, as you know, way beyond everybody else. So anyway, you asked a simple question about agents, and I went on a tirade. I apologize. So we open it up to some more questions.
No, it's great. Yeah, so if anybody has questions, type them in the chat. I'm certainly curious if you, because I love all the positivity and be nice talk, but I also wonder, like, do you feel jealous, you know, when you don't get picked for, you know, or recommended, or when you watch your peers, you know, kind of get bigger jobs or different things? Like, how do you deal with disappointment, or is that something you just let roll off, you know?
Well, I see Lindsay's question. I'm going to answer Jenny's question first, but I just want to let Lindsay know I did see your question. Because art and creativity is a very personal thing, it's something that it's a part of us. I mean, it really is. It's so easy to be wounded by rejection and criticism, and it's just natural. And if you are, you're not alone. It's like, that's everybody. So don't feel bad. And if you want to talk to somebody about it, you know, talk to somebody. It on a certain level, you just come to realize that's just the way it goes. That's the business, and it is business. It's not personal, right? But you, on another level, it never gets better. It always sucks, but you have to make your peace with that. Again, it can be a difficult business, and you really have to make your peace with it. And there's a lot of people I'm sure are in counseling and therapy in this business. You know, I mean, actors in counseling and therapy are kind of legendary, so it's understandable. But you also have to realize from a analytical point of view, it's not always about talent. You know, just like what I was telling you, it could be like, I had a friend who wanted to hire me to shoot a movie in Chicago, and he's a director. And but the executive producer of the movie wanted her person, who was a lot less experienced. Well, she's putting up the money, she gets her person, and that's just the way it went. And it sucked, because I really wanted to work with this guy who was another Houstonian. He's somebody I had known since I was in Houston. I had gone to high school for performing in visual arts with his sister. But it's just the way it goes, and it is frustrating. I will say that in my experience, I tend to be really good in meetings, which is important that you're good in person, that you're gregarious, that you're friendly, that you're a problem solver. People want to hear, you know, that you're resourceful. People want to hear that you're not going to bust their budget, that you're not going to go over schedule. You know, they want to have some sense of these kind of things. If I get a meeting, I typically get the job. That's my experience, and I'm happy for that. And you know, it's again, you know, building relationships. It's a long-term thing. The long game is not full of quick fixes. It's full of investments of time, lots of time. And I don't mean that you're bugging somebody every day of the week, but I mean, over the course of the year, you are always checking in, and maybe you're building that relationship for 2 or 3 years before it bears fruit. But you will have loyal people who will call you back again and again, and you'll be their first pick, and you'll get in, and you know, without even having to audition, as it were. They'll just be like, that's my guy, that's my girl, that's the person I want, or they'll recommend you. I try to not take those things personally. I try to be sanguine about it. I mean, honestly, the reality for all of us is we will be passed over or rejected 99 times out of 100. I mean, it's It's just, but it's a numbers game. It's like, that's why you have to meet a lot of people. That's why you have to apply for a lot of jobs. And another way to look at this is, let's go back to the friends analogy. Let's go back to the dating analogy. You know, how many friends do you have? How many best friends do you have? How many significant others do you have? You know, these are the kind of relationships. It's that kind of an intimacy. And I don't mean physical intimacy, but I mean, you know, they're my best, you know, they're my BFF. It's that kind of an intimacy out of which the best professional relationships will arise, you know. So it's finding that. It's like, you know, and people in this business like to hire their friends. And it's not necessarily, you know, it's like you know, friends that you can talk your hobbies with, you know. You both like to you know, play guitar. I mean, there's this director that I work with a lot, and we both play guitar, and if we go on location, we bring our guitars and we jam. And he and I have a lot of other things in common. We have, you know, favorite music artists and favorite movies, and we're both you know, tech heads. We both geek out on you know, lenses and stuff. But it's looking beyond just the filmmaker. It's just like saying, oh, well, she's a girl and I'm a guy, and our biology is compatible, so we should get together. Well, obviously that's not the case. Obviously there's a lot more to it than that. And so it's not just a matter of, here's a director, I'm a DP, let's get together. It's the same thing. It's like, what are all the pieces, you know, that build that bridge? You know, it's like, what makes us enjoy just sitting down and having a beer together? So that's just some insight. And I mean, look, it's like, that's the long-term stuff. That's the powerful relationship which move the needle on your career. I'm not saying, look, we all do the day jobs. We all do the jobs where we just get hired for a day. We don't really know the people. I mean, that's a part of it too. I mean, but I'm talking about the long career game rather than just income. One of the composers in town, a really good friend of mine, Scott Zaba, who I've known, you know, since I was a kid. Scott has this great saying. He says there's three kinds of work. He says there's art, there's craft, and there's rent, you know. And the stuff you do for rent may not go on your reel, may not go on your website, it may not go on your resume. You know, you're shooting some geeky little interview, or you're shooting somebody's wedding, or, you know, who knows? I mean, I've done stuff that I'm like, I'm not ever telling anybody. I mean, I'm not doing naughty stuff, but stuff that, you know, is not glamorous. It's not sexy. I mean, people want to, oh, you worked with a celebrity. That's what they want to hear about. And that's another thing that I will tell you in this business is people are hung up on celebrity. You know, so if you look at my website and you look at the thumbnails, there's a lot of recognizable faces. And I pick those faces over maybe something that's like, oh, as a cinematographer, I think that's aesthetically beautiful. And this is another thing that I'll touch on really quick, is selling yourself. You have to realize that a demo reel or a website or a resume or a cover letter is not about bragging about yourself. The most important thing, it's not showcasing the stuff you love, because you are not going to hire you. It's like fishing. You want bait. What catches fish? Celebrities catch fish, right? So you put celebrities. If you've worked with celebrities, you put celebrities. Like when you're doing a resume, it's important to put who's the production company, who's the director, who's the producer, you know, because somebody looking at that's going to say, oh, I know that person. Oh, that's a cool company. You know, if you know, just all the stuff like that is you have to realize in your presentation that you are trying to attract somebody to hire you, and attracting somebody to hire you is very different than the museum of your awesomeness, as counterintuitive as that might be. But you have to kind of learn to think like the client. What's the client looking for? And so, you know, if you look at the thumbnails on my website, I mean, I've curated them specifically, you know, to attract, you know, the kind of person who might be interested in that clip. And brevity is always important. Nobody in this business has a ton of time. So long letters, long resumes will never get read. your resume should be one page, no matter how much experience you have. And again, if you want samples, I will email me. I will give you samples of resumes. I will send you my resume. I will send you other resumes. But the less material that's on your resume, the less material that's in your letter, the more memorable what remains will be. Super important. Super important. You want people to remember you. You don't want this just this, this tidal wave of stuff. Because the other thing you have to remember is the person looking at your resume is not just looking at your resume. They got a stack about that thick, and they got to go through them, and they got to go through them quick, and they don't have that much time, especially if you're a PA. If you're entry level, they just don't care. And another mistake that a lot of people make is leading with their education. The only people who should lead with their education are students with no work experience. But even students have probably worked on short films. So create those to look like they are independent short films, format them in a way that it does not look like a student film, and put it under work experience. Lead with your work experience. Just a lot of things I could tell you about resumes that, people say, nobody ever looks at my resume. And again, it's true. It's like, yeah, maybe for the PA, they would look at it, but the further you go, the less likely they are to look at it. But some people still do. I mean, it does happen. But anyway, that's just something to bear in mind with everything is that the more you give them, the less memorable each of the bullet points will be. So try and condense and be succinct and be courteous of other people's time. They'll appreciate that. And the other thing I'll tell you about the resumes, which you will see when you look at these resumes, is remember, this is a creative business. This is a creative industry. Don't make a resume that looks like you're applying to IBM. It shouldn't be black and white and very businessy. Creativity is encouraged. Color, art, interesting layouts. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff, and people will value that if you are expressive and personalize your resume. And not only that, it'll make you memorable. Something I used to do with my demo reels when they were physical is I would create a label and I would stick it in a shelf with others, and I would step back and I'd be like, does my eye go to that one? Same thing with a resume. If there's a stack of resumes on the table, which one does your eye go to? Probably the one with color, probably the one that looks different. Because this is a creative industry, is use that. I tell people all the time, use, whatever will give you an advantage, use that. So let me see here. Give me just a second to read Lindsay's question. You spoke about on-set changes during COVID, but you keep mentioning networking. How is that currently being impacted? Is it currently possible to begin establishing a network long distance, for instance, in Los Angeles, since so much is now virtual? Or what career cultivation should we be looking into while everything else is shut down? Well, Lindsay, the good news is these virtual connections are actually facilitating what you're looking for. The fact that a guy sitting in LA is talking to you right now in Houston is proof of that. We are engaging and having this interchange because of virtual technology. If it was all in a classroom, I'd have to fly into town, and that's probably not practical. I do feel that one-on-one is the strongest connection you can make. It's especially, sitting, with somebody, having a coffee. Oftentimes when I'm building a new client connection, I will say, let's have coffee, let's have lunch, which is not so practical right now, but you could do a one-on-one Zoom or a FaceTime or a Skype. But the other thing is, like I said, show up, consider yourself a brand. Just like Coca-Cola or Ford or Netflix, you are a brand. Lindsay Allison is a brand. So you have an image, and you have a public image or a lack of a public image. And all of these things, your resume, your website, your short film that goes to a festival, what you post on YouTube, your presence in Facebook filmmaking groups, that's building your brand. And so that's your objective. And so you want to be active in these groups. Now, you don't have to be active in all of them. some of them, you may like the content and the group more than others. And those are the ones you can put your focus on. Some of these groups, there's ones called paid production ads. Paid production jobs. So some of them, they post jobs. And one of the things that I do is, even if it's not a job for me, if I see a job that's good for somebody else, I'll send it to them. I'll say, hey, look at this, and that's me building that relationship. That's me giving value to that other person. And it's also me being a good citizen in our community. And you can, not only can you send it to individuals, but you could repost it in another group. Like you could see a job opportunity in Houston Filmmakers, and you could post it in the Houston Young Filmmakers group. So, but just participate in those things. And again, if you email me, I will send you some of these resources. Stage 32 once a month does an introduce yourself weekend, where people kind of do a post introducing themselves, and you can introduce yourself, and then you can browse through the people who have introduced themselves and see if there's anybody you'd like to connect with. And again, the reality of this is, it's just like dating. I mean, how long does it take you to find somebody you really want to date? It's not your first couple of tries. It may take a while. Same thing here. You've got to invest some time. It's not always going to be about putting your hand into the bag and coming out with a bunch of gold nuggets. But you have to do the process. You have to, meet the people. You have to put in the time, and you will find them. And like I said, look at their social media profiles, not just their engagement, but look at the about, look at their photos, look at who their friends are. Who are your mutual friends? Where did they go to school? Oh, we went to the same school, or, oh, we have the same hometown. You can look them up on LinkedIn. You can look them up on IMDb Pro if you have a subscription. You can look them up on, Twitter or Google them. I mean, so many things that you can do to have, to find those personal connections, because it's okay to talk about film, but that's kind of a superficial level. If you connect with a filmmaker, because they like to play poker and you like to play poker, that's just a whole other level you've taken that relationship to. So an important insight. And I would give you, as an aside, it's important to have mentors. So find people who do what you want to do, and try and engage them. I mean, there's people in the local Houston community that you can engage with. You can even some working filmmakers, people who have television shows and feature films in the theaters. You can get their contact information. One resource is the Directors Guild of America has a membership directory that anybody can search. Most people do not have a direct contact, but a surprising handful do. They'll have a phone number, an email, and you could just reach out to them and ask them questions and see if they'd be willing to mentor you. The big names, like the Spielbergs and the James Camerons, they're not going to have easy to find information. You could try going through their agent, and you might get something, which you probably won't. But again, all of this is diligence. All of this is the job you do. It's like filmmaking is so much fun. It's like, wouldn't it be great if we could do that all the time? But everybody, no matter what they do, has a part of their job that's not fun. And this is the part of our job that, I mean, it can be fun. You could look at it that way, especially if you like engaging with people. But there's a lot of technical, just research that needs to go into connecting with people and making the meaningful connections. But again, if you consider that your opportunities come out of the people and the advice comes from the mentors, there's value in you trying to find high quality people. So just something to think about. So if you do want to try and track down some mentors, again, you can email me, and I'll send you the DGA website. There's some other websites and some advice I can give you on trying to connect with those people, and also, what you might say to them to engage that with them. But those are all the networking things, and there's other Zoom groups. Lindsay, if you email me, and just remind me, because I'm not going to remember all these people, but remind me, there's I don't know what you want to do, but you know, like for instance, I do camera stuff, and I belong to a group called the Digital Cinema Society, which is pretty reasonable. I forget what their annual fee is, but their lifetime fee is $300 to be a member, and then you're in forever. But they have a great newsletter that they send out once a week that lists all the events coming up. And you know, prior to quarantine, you know, you would physically have to be in LA or Chicago to go to these events. But now most of them, you know, even trade shows like CineGear and NAB have virtual components. So you are able to participate, and you're able to do Zoom panels. And so in the Digital Cinema Society, they'll have, you know, ARRI will introduce a new set of lenses, and they'll have a Zoom panel where, you know, the guy from ARRI is talking about it, and some notable DPs are talking, and they show some footage. And you can engage, you can meet those people, you can connect with them, you can chat with them, and you know, and you can engage with them and meet them. And so these are all different ways of using this time. And there's just so many things I'm not thinking of, because I mean, literally every week I'm doing Zoom stuff. The Houston Young Filmmakers group, once a month we have a session with a filmmaker. Last month we had Michelle Mower, and like I told you, that is archived on the Facebook page. You can play it back, but in the future you could attend those live, and you could meet fellow filmmakers. And I will tell you this, the people who show up, like yourselves, all the people I'm talking to, and the people who show up at the Houston Filmmakers group, those are the people who have an edge on everybody else. You know, you would be surprised at how many people just don't show up. They don't put in the time. They don't come to the events. They don't participate in the community. So already you're doing something that puts you ahead of the pack. I don't want to talk it to death, but I hope that I covered that for you. What is Kate Phillips says, good question. Manuel Breton says, what are some of your favorite early work? That's a good question. Well, you know, one thing I will tell you is this: you know, I usually tell filmmakers to practice a two-pronged approach to success. And what I mean by that is you have your ultimate goal. You want to be a director, you want to be a DP, you want to be a screenwriter, you want to be a producer. But the reality of working in the film business is you're not going to get your first job or your second job or your third job in one of those positions, at least not on a good budget paying job. That's not realistic. So you're going to have to do something like PA or grip or assistant edit. And that's important. So you're going to have that resume, and you're going to have that thrust of trying to get clients to get jobs to pay your bills. Now, the good thing is you're learning your craft, and you're building a network as you go. You're building people who, you know, you're both assistant editors, but you know, 10 years from now, that other assistant editor is a director, and they're hiring you to cut their movies. So that's one of the things. But at the same time, you've got to be practicing the thing you ultimately want to do. So even if you're working as a PA, you've got to be directing. And we've already talked about the fact that lack of resources is not an excuse. There's free editing software, there's free script writing software, and most of you probably have a smartphone or a friend who owns one. So obviously not ideal, but you know, just like the analogy of using a wheelchair instead of a dolly, you don't make an impediment not work for you. You know, you find a story that you can tell. You don't set it in a hospital. You know, you don't set it on the street. You know, you set it in a house that you have access to, or a park that you can shoot in. You don't have a lot of actors. You just have a couple of actors, and you create something that is logistically favorable to your success. And you make it, and you direct, and or you shoot, or you edit. And you want to do this repeatedly. It's just like if you want to build up your muscles, you go to the gym and you work out. And the bad news is that first week, you're not going to be bulked up. And your first projects are probably not going to be awesome. They're probably not going to be stuff that 10 years from now you're proud of. You're going to look back and you'll be like, oh, I like that and I like that, but overall, it's not what I would do now. So, but the important thing is to do it. And a great story that I like to tell, there was a person who was at the Directors Guild of America out here, the DGA, and a director was speaking on stage. And that director asked the audience, who can tell me what a director does? And all the hands went up and people are like, oh, the director guides the vision of the film. The director crafts the actors' performances and all the obvious answers. And this person said, that's only partially right. What a director does is a director directs. Now that's easy to say and it's super obvious, but you'd be surprised at how many directors don't direct. They say they do, they have the website, they have the business card, but they don't do it. You have to do it ongoingly. It's like anything. It's like learning a musical instrument. It's like training for a marathon. You can't do it once or twice and be awesome. I mean, we're all human. Spielberg did not start out awesome. You know, everybody has to start out, you know, stumbling through the dark and building the muscles. And it's a process. It's just like everything else. You make your peace with it. You know, there's not a quick rocket to success. It's like, you know, it's what they say is overnight successes are actually people who have been, you know, working and learning and studying and developing and getting better, you know, behind the scenes for years and years and years, and then they break out. But if you look under the hood, you'll see that this person put in a lot of time to be really good doing what they do. So having said that, I mean, you know, that horror movie I told you about that I did that Jeff scored, I mean, there are things I'm proud of. It's a schlocky, low budget horror movie that at this point in my career, I would not show to somebody. But there's still a montage of it on my website. I'm still proud of my work, you know, from a certain point of view. One of the films that I did that I'm really proud of, which I don't know if you would call it early work, but I did a movie in Texas in 2006 called Cook County. And our actors were Xander Berkeley, who is a character actor who's done a lot of notable things. He was in Terminator 2. He was in Air Force One. More recently, he was on Walking Dead. I mean, the guy is always working. If you look at his resume or if you look at a picture of him, you'll be like, oh, I know that guy. And another person who was in it was Anson Mount. And Anson was in the Hell on Wheels television series. And in the last season of Discovery, he played Captain Pike. Terrific actors, and it's a really powerful movie. It's a dark movie. It's about people, you know, who are addicted to and selling meth in the backwoods of Texas. But you know, but it's a powerful movie. I think it's well made. We shot it on Super 16. And there's just a lot of things I like about it. I'm really proud of my lighting. It's a very raw movie. It's a very different movie. It's not beautiful and slick. But that's one of my favorites. And you know, there's some music videos I did. You know, everybody, you know, always talks about Britney Spears' Toxic. I mean, that's something that I shot that Joseph directed, that a lot of people just know that and they're like, oh my God. And I'm proud of that. Although honestly, it's not the one I'm most proud of. I did one for TLC called Damaged, which we shot in Atlanta, that I am very fond of. And the Moby video, I love it because I'm a space geek. You know, I grew up during the Apollo missions and Star Trek and Star Wars and all of that, and so I just love space. So that was super fun. I shot a movie in Brazil once. I loved going to Brazil. It was so fun, and you know, it was an interesting challenge eating vegetarian in a country that worships meat. And it's so funny because you tell them they're vegetarian, they'll be like, "Oh, it's chicken." They don't get it. But anyway, I love that. Now the movie, you know, I'm proud of my work in it, but it's really a very, very silly movie. The good news is it starred Rutger Hauer. It was a thrill working with him. I've got stories about Rutger Hauer. If you email me, I might tell you some of them. And I worked with Gabrielle Anwar and Craig Sheffer, who are terrific actors. Gabrielle is one of those actresses who it's almost impossible to light wrong. She's just got such a wonderful face. And I really, I've met so many nice people, and I love working in other countries. I've worked all over the world, and just the travel jobs are super fun. I did a TV series in Louisiana last year that was a whole lot of fun. But anyway, hopefully that answers your question, some of your favorite early work. Michael Cohn, thank you very much, Brad. I must depart for another meeting, but I enjoyed your presentation. You're welcome. And Lindsay says, thank you. So any other questions? Oh, here we go. Xander, hi, Brad. Does a cinematographer have a different set of skills than a DP? There are some common skills and that overlap, right? Are there important key differences, or are the terms interchangeable? The quick answer is the terms are interchangeable. They are exactly the same thing. And in England, they actually have another term. They call it a lighting cameraman. But it's all the same. Now, I will tell you this is that, different people have different mixes. Two typical paths to becoming a DP are either through camera department or through lighting department. So, people can have kind of an emphasis in their skills. And I came through the camera department, but then I really got into lighting, especially because my background is in fine arts. So, shaping things with light and color really, really appeals to me. And of course, the lenses that you choose. And, there are some people who depend a lot on their gaffer for lighting. I don't. I could do it all by myself. But I do like collaboration. And if I work with a new gaffer, I'll tell them, look, because I work fast, I have a shorthand, and I may tell you, put a 2K over here, put an area 60 over there, and put a bounce behind me. That's just to be quick. That's my shorthand for speed. But if you have another suggestion, speak up. Let me know. I'd love to hear if you have another way of doing this. But that's just one of the habits I learned to go quickly rather than going on set and speaking, philosophically about how I want it to look, because that's open to interpretation and you may not get what you want. But also, learning lighting, part of it comes from, watching movies and reading American Cinematographer and watching interviews with DPs. But part of it, a big part of it, comes from looking at light in life. Around you, if you're in a space and it's especially beautiful lighting, pay attention. What is that? Is it direct sunlight through a window? Is it something coming from a lamp? Is it filtered through a shade? Is it bouncing off a surface? What color is the surface? Is it a shiny surface? Is it a matte surface? But observing things like that will help you build skills. So I hope that answers your question. Any other questions? Another thank you from Xander. You're welcome. I'm glad that answered your question.
Yeah, we will need to wrap this up because I have to start teaching it too. So if there are any last minute questions, this has been great. Thank you so much, Brad.
You're welcome.
I hope everybody got something out of it, and it's great that you're making yourself available with your email to further the conversation. So
yeah, I do hope that you guys got what you wanted out of it. Hey, there's Bruno. I see you. Thank you for joining. Bruno has been a part of the Houston Young Filmmakers group.
Great.
He attended some of the in-person events. I do, I love mentoring and helping people out. And I guess I'll leave you guys with this final thought. you know, my mother taught me an important lesson, especially because I was so shy. I remember, you know, one time she took me and my brother to a 7-Eleven and she said, "You guys want a Slurpee?" And we said, "Yeah." And she says, "Okay, go in and get it." And we just stayed in the car and cried because we were so shy, and we didn't get it. And, you know, all these years later, I remember that lesson. And then later in my life, my mother told me, she said, "Always ask for what you want. The worst thing that's going to happen is they'll tell you no." And it's so important, if you want a mentor or you want advice or you want to intern on set or you have questions, is ask. I mean, I do these things all the time and I speak to classes, and I'm always stunned at how few people take advantage of the opportunity of that connection to pursue it. And I just wonder, you know, are these people thinking that they're going to graduate and Paramount's going to send a limo to pick them up? You know, how do you get forward in your career if you don't engage with the opportunities that come your way? You know, and some people say, well, I just don't want to bother this person. I don't want to email them because that's going to be bothering them. And I just want to give you two pieces of advice with respect to that. One is that almost everybody in this business started where you were, and they remember it. And people help them get to where they are, and they remember it. And anybody with a good character has a sense of paying that forward. So you always are looking out for opportunities to help the next people coming up. So don't look at it as a burden. To us, it's a privilege to be able to pass along the advice and opportunities that were given to us to somebody else and help them in the same way that somebody helped us at one point. And the other thing that I will tell you is that again, anybody with character, if you're bugging them too much, they're gonna tell you. They're gonna just say, you know. Plus, you can ask them. Here's what I would do is when you contact them is say I would like to stay in touch. How often may I check back in with you? Or when would be a good time to check back in with you? And I would never leave something open-ended. I would never say, you know, just check in again. Then either ask or say, I'll check in with you in 2 months, or I'll check in with you in a month, or 6 months, or whatever, and put it on a calendar. You know, hold yourself accountable to your goals. All the things we've talked about, you know, create a goal every day. What are you going to do? You're going to network, you're going to go on Facebook, you know, you're going to look up a mentor. You know, just like if you were working for a company, you would have jobs every day. Give yourself jobs and hold yourself accountable to them. And so I guess that's a good way to wrap it up.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's perfect. I think it's definitely exactly what I mean, I think it's great. So I really appreciate it. And I really hope that everybody takes you up on your offer to stay in touch. And I was just talking about this with my students recently about, you know, staying in touch with things and people, and over the years, you know, the things that have come out of that, how unexpected or wonderful that might be. And so, so yeah, this is great. Well, thank you again.
You're welcome.
Reminder to everyone, we're doing this every week now. Next week, we'll be talking with some local producers. So please register, and I'll make this link of the recording available to you, Brad.
Thank you.
And I'll be putting it up on the HCC Facebook as well. So so thank you again, and have a great day to everyone. Thank you for joining us. And we'll see you next week. All right.